Well, welcome everybody to this segment of Lewis at Large. Excuse me, and of course, that means smart talk radio is in your future, and this segment should be a good one. We're going to be talking about, actually, we've never really talked specifically about this subject before on some 600 shows prior to this one. We're going to be talking about diabetes, but how it relates to the kitchen. And we're going to be talking to our friend Jennifer Bucko Lamplough. She is the co-author of Healthy Calendar Diabetic Cooking. It's actually the second edition. It's a full year of delicious menus and easy recipes. Diabetic or not, I think that's probably what Jennifer will tell us, and should be an awfully interesting conversation indeed. Jennifer is well renowned. She's an instructor for the Robert Morris University Institute of Culinary Arts in Chicago. She's also recently featured on the Food Network's Fat Chef and president of Les Dames. I'm going to let her pronounce it. In the Chicago chapter, she's also appeared on WLS TV up there, WGN, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And again, Jennifer, I've said this many times, there's nothing like a great introduction, and that was nothing like a great introduction.
I think that was a great introduction. I'm like, who's he talking about?
Yeah, it can't be me.
Thank you, Warner.
Hey, welcome here. Let's, well, first of all, let's highbrow. If I'm not a diabetic and I'm listening to this show, do I want to keep listening?
Absolutely. I think I know more people who use this cookbook are people who are just trying to eat healthy than people with diabetes. I think it's both, but I know so many people who use this book who are just trying to eat healthy because, frankly, the diabetic diet I think is the healthiest one out there because it's really balanced.
Okay, well, let's give some background here for our Lewis at Large listeners. Tell us again, beyond the way I butchered your bio here a little bit, but tell us a little bit about you, A, why cooking, and B, why diabetic cooking is of particular interest to you.
Sure. I come from a family of cooks, all the way back to my grandmother. Everybody in my family is excellent cooks. I grew up in the food service industry. My parents actually owned a Dairy Queen when I was growing up, and so I cut my culinary teeth, starting out making dilly bars when I was 12. And so
nothing better, by the way.
Nothing better, right? And so I actually ended up, when I went to college, I went to school for journalism, and I was a writer for a while, and I always sort of wanted to cook or be in the culinary industry for my career, and I was thinking about a master's degree, and I ended up going back to culinary school. So in my mid-20s, I went back and studied to become a chef and started working in the industry then. My best friend, who I had been best friends with since I was 12 years old, Laura Rondinelli Hamilton, is a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes educator. And we were talking about the combination of a chef and dietitian team, and we thought, we really could probably do a lot of good to help people with healthy cooking. She specialized in diabetes. I come from a family of diabetics. My grandmother had diabetes. My uncle had diabetes. My mom has type 2 now, which she developed much later than even when we started the books. But it's always been a scare for me, diabetes, because it runs in my family, and so it is of particular interest to me. And so we just thought, we really think that we could do some good, because Laura's patients were saying to her, just tell me what to eat and I'll eat it. I think when someone gets diagnosed with diabetes, the thought that they can't eat their favorite foods is very scary. And can even be depressing. And so they were just, telling her, just tell me what to eat and I'll eat it. And so we thought, well, we can't do that necessarily for every meal, but we can do it at least for dinner. And so that's how the idea for this is our first book. The first version of this came out in 2004. And so the one that's out now is the second edition. And so it's been about 10 years since we wrote it. And the American Diabetes Association has changed their guidelines, and there's some newer products available on the market that are easy to get. So we updated the recipes. We took out 30 recipes that were sort of outdated and updated it with 30 new ones. We added gluten-free options. And so, we really thought we can really help people, tell them what to eat. So it's all your dinners for the week, Monday through Friday. And the best part of this is that it also has a grocery list. So all of your meal planning for dinners for the week is done, basically.
Well, Jennifer, we know you're not a physician, but and we know part of this answer, I would think. But just for review, share with our audience the nature of diabetes, and so therefore the nature of things that they are going to want to avoid.
Sure. Well, there's two different kinds of diabetes. There's type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes. And type 2 diabetes is usually the one that you get later in life. Sometimes we call it adult onset diabetes. And so that's really more the kind of diabetes that can be controlled with diet and exercise. Type 1 is a whole different disease. It's controlled by insulin injections and those sorts of things. So this book really is more for the type 2 diabetic, and it's really about balancing your food groups: proteins, carbohydrates, fats, sodium, and having a balance of those things. Lara, who's the dietitian and the diabetes educator, could talk more about exchanges. So you have what's called diabetes exchanges, and so you have a certain number of carbohydrate exchanges you can eat per day, and you have to balance that throughout the day to control your blood sugar. And so our recipes give all the nutrition information, but they also give the exchanges. So if you look at the book, you'll see, a recipe for, something like pecan chicken salad. So it'll have the calories and the fat and everything per serving, but then it'll also have the exchanges or choices, they call it sometimes too. So it's like 1 starch, 3 lean meat, 1 vegetable, 1.5 fats. And so if you're counting carbohydrate exchanges, this gives that to you, and so you don't have to calculate it yourself.
How friendly and how available are most of the ingredients that you're talking about, and how friendly overall is the food industry? And that's too big of a category. Let me back that down. Let's just say the grocery industry to those with diabetes.
It is made serious strides in the last 10 years, making products like whole grain or whole wheat, things like pasta, bread, brown rice, the higher fiber foods are so much more readily available now in a regular grocery store as opposed to 10 years ago when a lot of times you had to go to a health food store to be able to get those kinds of products, even for gluten-free too, which has nothing to do with diabetes, but we do have some, people are really looking at gluten-free options. You just have so much more access to specialized diet foods than you ever did before. And so the book, what we focused on is how I like to cook. I mean, I'm a professional chef, but I still don't have 3 or 4 hours a day to cook meals for me and my husband. So I like recipes that are easy. I like the recipes that are easy to follow, that are quick, and that have ingredients that I can find in one grocery store. I don't want to have to go to 3 different stores to be able to try to find what I'm looking for. So it's very focused on quick, easy, and readily available ingredients.
Well, if you've just joined us, shame on you. Yours truly, Warner Lewis, here from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio. A special guest this segment is Jennifer Bucko Lamplough, and she is a chef, but beyond that, in the Chicago area, but beyond that, we're talking specifically about the Healthy Calendar Diabetic Cooking Cookbook. It's a full year of delicious menus and easy recipes for the diabetic or others with or without diabetes. Jennifer, I'm curious as to how much, and again, your partner that you talked about, Laura, who co-wrote this with you, she brought some of the medical expertise. But did you also, what kind of consultations with medical experts and those specifically versed in diabetes did you all work with to put this together?
Well, the book is published by the American Diabetes Association, and so we work very closely with them to make sure that all of our recipes adhere to their guidelines. They have a booklet of guidelines that talks specifically about how many, for example, how many grams of saturated fat is allowable per serving of a recipe. And so we have to make sure that all of our recipes adhere to their guidelines because they wouldn't publish our book if it didn't adhere to their guidelines. And they are, the foremost experts on diabetes, the American Diabetes Association.
Well, let's, we need to dive in here a little bit. Let's start with let's just talk about, take a dinner and walk through it. Talk to us about, what kind of a starter, appetizer, or salad sort of would you start with?
Sure. Well, I'm looking at the book right now, and I'm looking at January week 3, right? Because that's what we're in right now. Or are we in week 4 of January, the 4th week of the month? And so for this menu for this week, we have ham and white bean soup with a quick, creamy cornbread. Now, does that sound like a diabetes-friendly recipe to you? Probably not, right? We have quick tacos. We have spinach pasta shells. We have tuna with tomatoes and olives and roasted asparagus. We have turkey lasagna. this is the 1 week of the month. These are the recipes, and they're all tailored to meet the diabetes guidelines. So we're using things like whole wheat pasta. We are using lean proteins like fresh tuna. We're using whole grains like cornmeal, which is a whole grain. So making a cornbread as opposed to serving a soup with, a white dinner roll. And then the other great thing about the book is once a month we also insert a dessert. So we don't do a dessert every week, but we do a dessert once a month. And so the dessert of the month for January is banana chocolate chip bread. Now, again, doesn't sound like something somebody with diabetes should be eating, right?
Right.
But we use canola oil and egg whites to keep the fat content down, and we use oatmeal to up the fiber content. So, a serving of this banana chocolate chip bread, for example, is something that you wouldn't think somebody with diabetes should be eating, but if they work it into their meal plan, it's one serving of it is 1.5 carbohydrate servings. And so it's 120 calories. It's only 3 grams of fat, so it's a really updated, healthy version of something that could be, very high in fat and calories.
All right, again, and I'm assuming that most of our listeners are not, although they should be, ready with pen and paper, but I want to dial back specifically. You mentioned turkey lasagna, all right? We all know what lasagna is all about.
Right.
If you would kind of specifically, kind of share with us specifically the ingredients as an example into that dish, and so people can see really what you're talking about. Okay,
so typically in a lasagna, maybe you're using ground beef. So we substitute ground beef and we use lean ground turkey. We use the 93% fat-free ground turkey, the one that has 7% fat in it, because the completely lean ground turkey is a little dry. And so we use the one that has about 7% fat. And so we use just about a pound of lean ground turkey. We use jarred pasta sauce, but they now make reduced sodium jarred pasta sauce. A lot of times anything that comes in a jar or a can can oftentimes be high in sodium because they use it as a preservative. And so now so many of these companies are realizing that people's sodium intake is really high. The thing with people with diabetes is oftentimes they're also overweight and they also have high blood pressure. They kind of all go hand in hand. It's not everybody, but a lot of time that goes hand in hand. So we're really careful about sodium intake. So we use the reduced sodium pasta sauce. We're using part skim mozzarella cheese, so a lower fat. We don't necessarily use fat-free cheese because it's the quality isn't as good. And so we'll use a reduced fat or a part skim cheese. And a lot of times people are using cups and cups and cups of cheese. We're only using 2/3 of a cup of cheese. The one thing that we do use fat-free is the ricotta cheese because ricotta cheese is made from skim milk, and so it is a fat-free ricotta is going to be a better quality than it's like a fat-free mozzarella that needs the fat in it to melt. So the ricotta cheese acts as the binder. So we do use a fat-free ricotta cheese. We use a little bit of freshly grated Parmesan. Parmesan cheese is a dry cheese, so it's a little bit better for you because it's not as fatty. And then we use 1 egg, chopped fresh parsley, and then the whole wheat lasagna noodles. And we use the no-boil noodles. Barilla makes them. They're like a whole grain, no-boil noodle. And so you skip that step of having to boil all the noodles before you layer your lasagna. You just layer it all with the noodles uncooked. And so it's actually a pretty quick lasagna, and it cooks. It really cooks. Once you get everything layered, it cooks in about just under an hour, about 50 minutes. So you cook it 25 minutes covered and then 25 minutes uncovered. So this is one of those things where you could assemble it the night before or the morning before you go to work, and then when you get home, throw it in the oven, get your day ready, make a salad, that kind of stuff, and then your dinner's ready in under an hour.
Wow, that, okay. Why don't you serve some up and FedEx it to me? And
I know, right? This is one of my husband loves lasagna, and I'm always kind of hesitant to make, I don't make a lot with a lot of pasta and cheese, but whenever he's craving lasagna, I always make this, and he's always satisfied. He doesn't complain like, I don't like turkey. You really, when you have the sauce and the cheese and everything, honestly, you can't tell the difference.
It doesn't
sometimes
matter.
I make it, and I don't even tell people I did turkey, and they don't even know.
Well, again, we're talking to Jennifer Lamplough. She's a chef, well-known chef in the Chicago area and across the country. She's combined with her friend Laura Hamilton, and they have produced the Healthy Calendar Diabetic Cooking Cookbook. Actually, it's an updated second edition. It's a full year of menus and easy recipes for the diabetic or anyone that eats with a diabetic. Jennifer, when you go around and you talk to other chefs, have any of other chefs picked up your recipes to serve just as a matter of form? To forget the fact that it's for a diabetic.
Absolutely. I mean, chefs, home cooks, everybody I know who has used our book they're so pleasantly surprised, because I just think there's a stigma against healthy cooking, and I think it's among chefs especially, because there's people who don't necessarily do healthy cooking or understand it think, oh, it can't possibly taste good if I'm cutting out all this fat and all this sugar and all this white flour and that kind of stuff. But you really can make stuff taste delicious and have it be healthy. And like I said before, sometimes I make healthy food and I don't even tell people it's healthy, because if you tell them it's healthy, they're automatically going to think it doesn't taste good.
Yeah.
So then I don't even tell them, and I let them eat it, and then I tell them afterwards, and they can't believe it.
Well, indeed, and I'll bet one of the things that I think the public gets, and if you have, I'd like to hear your opinion about this, is I heard an interview recently with the head of Whole Foods, and one of the observations was Americans are bombarded with news about the value of organic, the value of eating whole foods, whole grains, etc. And then the other half of the messages they get are junk food, okay, fast food, etc. And there's like an arms race almost going on both sides. I can get a double cheese, bacon, something or other from this particular fast food chain, and yet at the same time I can get whole grains over here. Who's winning that war, do you think?
I don't think anybody's winning, to be honest. I think it's always going to be a battle, because, you go to a fast food place and you can get a whole meal for $5, and I think people think, oh, if I buy organic or if I buy Whole Foods, it's going to cost me so much more money. And it's actually really not the case. It's that people are afraid to buy, I think people are afraid to buy larger quantities of fresh produce because they think it's going to spoil, they don't know how to cook it, they don't know what to do with it. And so it's just easier to go to a fast food place, and spend $5 and get a whole meal. And for me, my biggest thing is it's so hard to be completely one way or the other. So I just tell people when I'm teaching them about healthy cooking, do your best. 90% of the time, eat healthy food, cook your own food, buy Whole Foods, do your best. And if 5% of the time you're stopping and getting a cheeseburger, well, for me, for my life, the way my life is, to me, that's a victory. Because I think when you tell somebody you have to be one way only, it makes them not want to do it, because it seems like then you don't have a choice. And so I say do your best, and that's what I tell people all the time. I try to buy organic as much as possible, especially sort of the dirty dozen list, the sort of what they consider the highest pesticide list. So things like spinach and berries. When I can, I buy organic, but I don't always, because I just don't always have the opportunity to, or I don't, I'm not at a store where they have it that's organic. And so when I can, I do. I try to buy organic dairy when I can, which is, like I said, probably 75 to 80% of the time. And then the rest of the time I do my best, because everybody's busy. We're all working full time. We live in such a busy culture. We're always running, and I think this idea of busyness is almost like a badge of honor, like I'm busier than you, so, I have to stop and do this. But I think you can work that into your schedule. I take a couple of hours on a Sunday, and I prep food for the week. I cut up vegetables, I hard-boil eggs. I try to make it as easy on me as possible, so it's the same. It's the equivalent of going through a drive-thru. I go through a drive-thru in my fridge, because everything's kind of done and ready.
Right. Yeah, I've always wondered if the fast food industry did have, as an example, steamed vegetables as an offering. I think they'd sell them. I do.
Look at a place. Do you guys have Boston Market there?
Yes.
So there's a place like Boston Market with their sides. They do have healthy veggies, but sometimes I want mac and cheese.
Yeah, no kidding.
You know what I mean? So it's like 90% of the time I choose the steamed veggies, but I don't always want it, and you can't beat yourself up about it. You have to do your best.
What about, we have not touched on this, what about the alarming rise by anybody's measure in obesity and diabetes in children?
It's, frankly, it's terrifying. I mean, we talk about type 2 diabetes, and they call it adult onset, but quite frankly, more children are getting it now than ever before. And they say that this generation of children is going to be the first that's not going to outlive parents. And quite frankly, it's terrifying. And I think that's where the lesson of cooking your own food, I always tell people they're not afraid to cook. People who say they don't like cooking, they just don't know how. They were never taught. And it's not that they don't like to cook. They don't like to prep. it's all the prep work is what's hard, getting everything ready, chopped up, following a recipe, and I think that if you can start just trying, maybe try once a week, to cook your own meal, and then it gets easier and easier as you learn how to do things a little bit better and how to follow a recipe. That's why I think our recipes are so helpful, because they're really easy and really easy to follow. But you show that example to your children, and then they start to want to help. Kids love to cook. Every kid I've ever encountered, and I've been cooking, has wanted to help me because it's fun and it's interesting. And so I think if our culture can sort of get back to cooking at home and having family meals, I think that will really help the situation. And I just think activity is the other thing. I mean, I think that it's being active, and I'm not saying running a marathon. I mean just going for a walk or playing outside. I think that that's a huge factor. And quite frankly, kids in certain areas, it might not be safe to play outside. So there's that too. So I think it's a major issue, and I think more needs to be done about it.
And you're saying that there are recipes in here that certainly younger people would enjoy, too.
Oh, absolutely. We have, chicken fingers. We have chili. We have chili mac. We have macaroni and cheese, pizza. I mean, there's tons of kid-friendly recipes in this book.
Well, it is an interesting subject, a very serious subject indeed, that
Very
of diabetes, and across, in particular, Western culture for sure. The work is Healthy Calendar Diabetic Cooking. It's the second edition. It's a full year of delicious menus and easy recipes. Laura Rondinelli Hamilton and Chef Jennifer Bucko Lamplough. And hey, Jennifer, thank you so much for spending part of your day here. Obviously, I think we know this, but tell us how we can get a copy if we want one.
So you can get a copy of the book either directly from the American Diabetes Association on their website, diabetes.org, or you can get it at any local bookstore or online bookstore. And if your local bookstore doesn't have it, you could just ask them, and they usually will order it for you.
Okay, and again, it's the Healthy Calendar Diabetic Cooking. What's next for you? What's your next big project?
Well, you had mentioned earlier that I was on the Food Network show Fat Chef. I actually have struggled as an adult with weight problems, and I have been overweight for the last 20 years, and just within this last year, I've lost 60 pounds.
Wow.
And I spent this time teaching people how to cook healthy, and I was having, weight issues myself. So my focus is really on, continuing to be healthy and to teach others, what I've done to get to where I am, and hopefully, fingers crossed, maybe another book out of it.
So what's your weight loss secret besides healthy eating?
Well, healthy eating, working out, and I always tell people when you work out, sweat your butt off every time. And the third component for me was therapy. I had to deal with, a lot of times weight issues are really an emotional issue.
Right.
And I have finally figured that out. And so I've actually gone to therapy to figure out what the sort of the mental, I call therapy my mental workout, right, and then going to the gym my physical workout. So both times you have to sweat every time.
Hey, well, listen, again, best of luck. And again, I know this is sort of it's an updated edition of an earlier work, but thank you for sharing some time with us today, and look forward to hearing some more about you and Laura in your continuing efforts to kind of enlighten people on cooking and the relationship between healthy cooking and good eating.
Thank you so much. And your listeners, if they're interested, can follow me on Facebook. It's Fit Foodie Chef, or same on Twitter, Fit Foodie Chef.
All right. Hey, listen, thanks so much, and come back and join us again, please.
Thank you so much, Warner.
You bet. We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large.